Ah, sliding. That thing that we used to be able to do in video games from time to time, in rare cases, sometimes as a sort of secret, if you will, and now it's everywhere, with every goddamn game having a slide feature, even though sometimes maybe it's not all that useful or, practical. Almost as if every game that's ever used this feature in a meaningful way has already been released, and there's nowhere else to go with it. So this is the top 7 slides in video games, a show dedicated to all the greatest forms of sliding that has ever been put onto the digital canvas that is this beautiful art form. In the past 40 years, because it's not a new thing, it's been here for a while. Oh sure, it's everywhere now, but it's not new. It is so not new. It's just that now you sort of feel like everything that could have been done with this mechanic has been done, and every game trying to do anything with it from now on is just superfluous, derivative, redundant. That being said, Ultra Kill is super at using it, and Titanfall can be quite exhilarating, but you just feel that it's all kind of downhill from here. That being said, let's get it started with number 7. Super Mario Bros. Yes, sliding is that old. Now, if you haven't played Super Mario Bros. In a while, you may not remember this, but there used to be a trick to it. A trick that would let you cross under obstacles that would normally require you to be tiny. But instead of losing that power-up, you could instead get a running start and then slide under the obstacle. Or slide over the obstacle. Slide in general. It was a neat mechanic that you would just discover on your own. There is no tutorial, there is no section where the game goes, "Hey, now slide, press this button to slide. Good, you pressed the button to slide, do it again. Oh, you unlock an achievement. For sliding, you are the goodest person. Here, you deserve this. Have some validation." No, instead he just accidentally found it like everybody else did and realized it's a neat mechanic. It's fun. It makes Mario look very awkward. It's not necessarily stylish, but it works. And it was something that made you feel really proud when he showed it off to other people who had yet to find it. It briefly elevated you to the rank of king among peasants. Those were different times, I mean. Now you have to be able to 360 no-scope the entirety of Dark Souls with one hand tied behind your foot, blindfolded, while sitting in a pool on Twitch. I don't know, I don't watch Twitch anymore, so I don't know what they do now. Number 6. Mega Man 3. Now the thing was that Mario's slide was awkward and looked hilarious. It didn't look cool, but Mega Man 3 added its own slide. Just press jump and down and you're sliding. And you look cool doing it. And it's a mechanic that you have to use to dodge bullets or just reverse to land a bit faster while you look cool. Because generally this is what it's about. This is the main thing that sliding adds to video games. A factor of coolness. There may be more practical ways of getting around, but not this cool. It's like you're so slick that the force of friction which the earth and ground and gravel and asphalt should have had on your very, very sensitive flesh just doesn't work anymore. Either that or you're very oily and you should probably get that thing checked up on. But since you're Mega Man, I mean you're a robot, you probably have oil coming out of every, what I would imagine would be the robot equivalent of a pore. A port? Number 5. Warframe. I put Warframe here because it is emblematic of the kind of game that takes sliding a bit too far. You can just slide everywhere. The game is very much enamored with the sliding feature. It's been so since day one, and as you can see in this video I found on YouTube, you can slide intentionally for a while without it being some kind of bug. And while it was cool the first 2-3 times you did it, or 4 times or 5 times, hell 10 times, a dozen maybe, eventually gets kind of boring. And that's generally what the main disadvantage of this mechanic has been in a lot of games. It just gets kind of boring. And it tends to get kind of boring because it's everywhere and you don't really do much with it. And the reason why it's boring and you don't do much with it is because of number 4, Far Cry 2, or maybe 3. So here's the thing. First-person shooters do not used to have a sliding function, feature, mechanic every goddamn day. It used to be a rare occurrence, but then Far Cry did it. And it was popular, well, Far Cry 2 was popular-ish. Then they reused that for Far Cry 3 and that game sold like a bajillion million quadrillion copies and now everybody's doing it. It's in every shooter, it's in every game, it's in every title ever made. It's everywhere and that brings me mixed feelings because I want sliding in video games. I think it's a neat and very exhilarating mechanic to have if you do something interesting with it. And in Far Cry 2 it was interesting in the sense that games didn't do it all that often. First-person shooters did not do it all that often. 3D games did not do it all that often. I remember figuring out you could slide in Gothic and that changed my entire worldview. I was purposefully trying to slide off things just so I could see the animation. Same thing with Tomb Raider. Generally, sliding was not something you saw all that often in 3D games outside of some specialty game like Mirror's Edge, which came out a month after Far Cry 2 and has some absolutely amazing sliding sequences and it's actually well built into its general movement mechanic. But we don't have sliding everywhere now because of Mirror's Edge. No, we have it because of Far Cry. Number 3, Oni. You probably know that I am a big fan of this game. I love it, even though it's got absolutely trash level design, which is a staple of Bungie, and the enemies are just different colors of previous enemies, but with more hit points and more damage, which is another staple of Bungie and video games in general. But one thing it did marvelously was the combat, and the combat included the slide. You see, sliding wasn't just something you did to go beneath obstacles in Oni, as you did in most games. You actually used that in combat. You used that to initiate combat. You could absolutely just take a running start at an enemy, slide, and then kick them in the shins. That was a viable way of starting a combat encounter. Oh sure, the optimal way would have been to sneak behind them and break their back and kill them in one blow, but that wouldn't be fun. That's just min-maxing and ruining fun. Sliding was so liberating, it was so freeing. It still boggles my mind that this game was made over 20 years ago, and yet that fluidity of movement, blending motion, traversal in combat has not really been, simply put, it's not been equal, let alone surpassed. Because few games try to do all of that in one place. They tend to segregate combat from movement, such as Mirror's Edge did. The closest one to actually do something similar would have been the Jedi Knight series, but that didn't have sliding. Well, there was one instance of sliding and you only saw it in a cinematic in Jedi Academy when you fought Tavion's apprentice. But here it was in Oni, sliding into people, punching them in the face, rolling away, sliding again. But most of all, if somebody came with a flying kick at you, you could slide under them, which is something you would not really see outside of fighting games. They actually took the time to make the enemy's attack not be just a huge big rectangle that stretches all the way to the ground even though the enemy's in the air, like most games do, because they don't care. That's why sliding in Oni was fantastic. Number 2, What? Honestly, do you even remember this game? Probably not. It was supposed to be published by Activision Blizzard, but they dropped it and Bethesda took over the publishing rights, and then, Bethesda did. And the game wasn't exactly what you would call like the greatest action game ever made, but it had sliding in it. And I mean a lot of sliding in it. A superb amount of sliding in it. It made Stranglehold, with the hard-boiled John Woo game sequel that came out, I believe, a year earlier than this, seem downright tame in terms of sliding, and that was a game where Chow Yun-Fat could slide on rails like he was in Tony Hawk's Pro Skater without, a skateboard, just his feet. This was even more extreme. Sliding was an integral mechanic of the combat. a combat where you would be shooting things non-stop constantly while running on walls, while sliding on the floor, sliding on ladders, and moving your character's perspective in such a way that sometimes you would be upside down while sliding forward. It was a very acrobatic game, and it took sliding to extreme levels of extremeness. And sure, the game now may be forgotten, and honestly it was kind of forgotten like a month after it was released, but the way it did sliding, especially with all the bullet time that sometimes went off and sometimes didn't, that just made your character look like she was sliding in slow motion but still moving in real time, which is actually something that Warframe still does, was truly a sight to behold when it was released. Also, the name probably explains why the character can just slide everywhere, but not as much as number 1, Vanquished. Now, I've never actually played Vanquished, I know very little of it, but what I do know is the following. Rocket-powered sliding. It doesn't really take much to understand why this is at the top of the list. Rocket-powered sliding. You as a human character get on your knees and then get rocket propellant boosted anywhere. Downhill, uphill, upstairs, everywhere you can just rocket slide. It's the most amazing thing I've ever seen. Sure, other games let you slide upstairs, like that Vampire the Masquerade game, which is gonna be released again, but that one does it because it was coded by people who didn't care, whereas Vanquish does it because it was made by people who think that putting jets or rockets on your ass and sliding around is a worthwhile usage of your time. And it is, it absolutely is. I don't think you can outdo this. I don't think there is a way. This is peak sliding. This is where the road ends. What else could they do? What else can there be after this? Nothing. There's been nothing for the last 12 years. Everything's just a pale shadow of it. Unless you go into really technical details about slide super jumping and ultra kill, that is. And this was the top 7 sliding in video games, or whatever I call this. I'd like to give a few special mentions to the sliding sequences from Tarzan, the sliding mechanic that is quite satisfying in Titanfall and Titanfall 2, the one in Dying Light, if I'm not mistaken, to Dhalsim from Street Fighter 2, who could sort of slide, and of course to Sub-Zero from Mortal Kombat, who is, to this day, the only character whose slide move actually makes sense because, you know, ice. He does that. Whereas everybody else, I mean, even with some rockets up your ass, there is still friction, and that would absolutely grind your bones to ashes in just a few meters. I've also noticed, while making this video, that a lot of these sliding games, the popular ones, the ones that really reinvigorated the idea, all seem to have come around the year 2008, 2009, 2010, where everybody was trying to find the new gimmick. And they did. Oh, they did. Goodbye.